The Golden Goose by the Brothers Grimm, narrated by Cheryl Bassett. There was once a man who had 3 sons. The youngest was called Dummerly, and was on all occasions scorned and ill-treated by the whole family. It happened that the eldest took it into his head one day to go into the forest to cut wood, and his mother gave him a delicious meat pie and a bottle of wine to take with him, that he might sustain himself at his work. As he went into the forest, a little old man bid him good day and said, "Give me a little bit of meat from your plate and a little wine out of your flask. I'm very hungry and thirsty." But this clever young man said, "Give you my meat and wine? No, I thank you. There would not be enough left for me." And he went on his way. He soon began to chop down a tree, but he had not worked long before he missed his stroke and cut himself, and was obliged to go home and have the wound bound up. Now it was the little old man who caused him this mischief. Next, the second son went out to work, and his mother gave him too a meat pie and a bottle of wine. And the same little old man encountered him also, and begged him for something to eat and drink. But he too thought himself extremely clever, and said, "Whatever you get, I shall be without, so go your way." The little man made sure that he should have his reward, and the second stroke that he struck at the tree hit him on the leg, so that he too was compelled to go home. Then Dummerly said, "Father, I should like to go and cut fuel too." But his father replied, "Your brothers have both maimed themselves. You had better stop at home, for you know nothing of the job." But Dummerly was very urgent, and at last his father said, "Go your way. You will be wiser when you have suffered for your foolishness." And his mother gave him only some dry bread and a bottle of sour ale. But when he went into the forest, he met the little old man, who said, "Give me some meat and drink, for I am very hungry and thirsty." Dummerly said, "I have nothing but dry bread and sour beer. If that will do for you, we will sit down and eat it together." So they sat down, and when the lad took out his bread, behold, it was turned into a splendid meat pie, and his sour beer became delicious wine. They ate and drank heartily, and when they had finished, the little man said, "As you have a kind heart and have been willing to share everything with me, I will bring good to you. There stands an old tree. Chop it down, and you will find something at the root." Then he took his leave and went his way. Dummerly set to work and cut down the tree, and when it fell, he discovered in a hollow under the roots a goose with plumage of pure gold. He took it up and went on to an inn, where he proposed sleep for the night. The landlord had 3 daughters, and when they saw the goose, they were very curious to find out what this wonderful bird could be, and wished very much to pluck one of the feathers out of its tail. At last the eldest said, "I must and will have a feather." So she waited till his back was turned, and then caught hold of the goose by the wing. But to her great surprise, there she stuck, for neither hand nor finger could she pull away again. Presently in came the second sister, and thought to have a feather too, but the instant she touched her sister, there she too hung fast. At last came the third, and desired a feather, but the other 2 cried out, "Keep away, for heaven's sake, keep away!" However, she did not understand what they meant. "If they are there," thought she, "I may as well be there too." So she went up to them, but the moment she touched her sisters, she stuck fast and hung to the goose as they did, and so they abode with the goose all night. The next morning Dummerly carried off the goose under his arm, and took no heed of the 3 girls, but went out with them, sticking fast behind. And wherever he journeyed, the 3 were obliged to follow, whether they wished or not, as fast as their legs could carry them. In the middle of a field, the parson met them, and when he saw the procession, he said, "Are you not ashamed of yourselves, you bold girls, to run after the young man like that over the fields? Is that proper behaviour?" Then he took the youngest by the hand to lead her away, but the moment he touched her, he, too, hung fast and followed in the procession. Presently up came the clerk, and when he saw his master, the parson, running after the three girls, he was greatly surprised and said, "Hullo, hullo, your reverence, whither so fast? There is a christening today." Then he ran up and caught him by the gown, and instantly he was fast too. As the five were thus trudging along, one after another, they met two labourers with their mattocks coming from work, and the parson called out to them to set them free. But hardly had they touched him when they too joined the ranks, and so made 7, all running after Dummely and his goose. At last they came to a city where reigned a king who had an only daughter. The princess was of so thoughtful and serious a turn of mind that no one could make her laugh, and the king had announced to all the world that whoever could make her laugh should have her for his wife. When the young man heard this, he went to her with the goose and all its followers, and as soon as she saw the 7 all hanging together and running about, treading on each other's heels, she could not help bursting into a long and loud laugh. Then Dummely claimed her for his bride. The wedding took place, and he was heir to the kingdom, and lived long and happily with his wife. Brothers Grimm. The Brothers Grimm, Die Brüder Grimm or Die Gebrüder Grimm, Jacob 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm Grimm 1786 to 1859, were German academics, philologists, cultural researchers, lexicographers and authors who together collected and published folklore during the 19th century. They were among the best-known storytellers of folk tales and popularized stories such as Cinderella, The Frog Prince, The Goose Girl, Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel, Rumpelstiltskin, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White. Their first collection of folk tales, Children's and Household Tales, was published in 1812. The brothers spent their formative years in the German town of Hanau. Their father's death in 1796 impoverished the family and affected the brothers for many years after. They attended the University of Marburg, where they developed a curiosity about German folklore, which grew into a lifelong dedication to collecting German folk tales. The rise of Romanticism during the 19th century revived interest in traditional folk stories, which to the brothers represented a pure form of national literature and culture. With the goal of researching a scholarly treatise on folk tales, they established a methodology for collecting and recording folk stories that became the basis for folklore studies. Between 1812 and 1857, their first collection was revised and republished many times, growing from 86 stories to more than 200. In addition to writing and modifying folk tales, the brothers wrote collections of well-respected German and Scandinavian mythologies, and in 1838 they began writing a definitive German dictionary, Deutsches Wörterbuch, which they were unable to finish during their lifetimes. Many of the Grimm's folk tales have enjoyed enduring popularity. The tales are available in more than 100 languages and have been adapted by filmmakers including Lotte Reiniger and Walt Disney, with films such as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Sleeping Beauty. During the 1930s and 40s, the tales were used as propaganda by the Third Reich. Later, in the 20th century, psychologists such as Bruno Bettelheim reaffirmed the value of the work, in spite of the cruelty and violence in original versions of some of the tales, which the Grimms eventually sanitized. Writing. From 1807 onward, the brothers added to the collection. Jacob established the framework, maintained through many iterations, from 1815 until his death. Wilhelm assumed sole responsibility for editing and rewriting the tales. He made the tales stylistically similar, added dialogue, removed pieces that might detract from a rustic tone, improved the plots, and incorporated psychological motifs. Ronald Murphy writes in The Owl, the Raven, and the Dove that the brothers, and in particular Wilhelm, also added religious and spiritual motifs to the tales. He believes that Wilhelm gleaned bits from the old Germanic faiths, Norse mythology, Roman and Greek mythology, and biblical stories that he reshaped. Over the years, Wilhelm worked extensively on the prose, expanded and added detail to the stories to the point that many grew to be twice the length of those in the earliest published editions. In the later editions, Wilhelm polished the language to make it more enticing to a bourgeois audience, eliminated sexual elements, and added Christian elements. After 1819, he began writing for children. Children were not initially considered the primary audience. Adding entirely new tales or adding new elements to existing tales, elements that were often strongly didactic. Some changes were made in light of unfavourable reviews, particularly from those who objected not all the tales were suitable for children because of scenes of violence and sexuality. He worked to modify plots for many stories. For example, Rapunzel, in the first edition of Kinder- und Hausmärchen, clearly shows a sexual relationship between the prince and the girl in the tower, which he edited out in subsequent editions. Tarter writes that morals were added. In the second edition, A King's Regret was added to the scene in which his wife is to be burned at the stake, and often the characters in the tale were amended to appear more German. Every fairy, fee, prince, prinz, and princess, prinzessin, all words of French origin, was transformed into a more Teutonic-sounding enchantress, Zauberin, or wise woman, Weise Frau, King's son, Königssohn, King's daughter, Königstochter. Grimm's Fairy Stories by Jacob Grimm and Wilhelm Grimm, illustrated by John B. Grueller and R. Emmett Owen, 1922. Contents: The Goose Girl, The Little Brother and Sister, Hansel and Gretel, Oh, If I Could But Shiver, Dummling and the Three Feathers, Little Snow White, Catherine and Frederick, The Valiant Little Tailor, Little Red Cap, The Golden Goose, Bearskin, Cinderella, Faithful John, The Water of Life, Thumbling, Briar Rose, The Six Swans, Rapunzel, Mother Holle, The Frog Prince, The Travels of Tom Thumb, Snow White and Red Rose, The Three Little Men in the Wood, Rumpelstiltskin, Little One Eye, Two Eyes, and Three Eyes.